Good morning or good evening, because I've come from a town that's controlled by Daesh, by ISIS. So good evening according to ISIS time. So um, dear ladies and gentlemen, when one comes from a country like Syria, where civilians are suffering from a war that has been going on for more than 4 years, he feels that it's impossible for him, especially as a researcher, to devote his energy and his intellectual zeals to talk about anything beside the Syrian crisis that is severely threatening the very existence of his country, its culture, and its people. However, the current crisis in Syria has its roots in the religious traditions of the country, mainly the Islamic theology. The most important aspect of the conflict in Syria today is the confrontation between the tradition and modernity, between the 7th century Arabia and the 21st century Syria. The war has become a manifestation of an old age conflict between two ideas. The Heraclitean idea that advancement is inevitable, that one cannot step twice into the same river, for other water are continuously flowing in, on the one hand, and Parmenides' monism and its view that change is merely an illusion on the other. The latter tendency is represented by Islamists who want to drag Syria back to the 7th century and keep it there forever after. As a neutral observer and as someone who has spent most of his life in Syria, I can say confidently that what is happening now is not just a military confrontation confrontation. Indeed, it is an unprecedented tragedy that had made the entire world morally bankrupt and completely unable to deal with such a calamity. A crisis of refugees, for example, is much more complex than what people may think, for there is something that is being totally ignored by the media. I mean religion. According to the best of my knowledge, there is a cultural battle lurking beneath the sound of guns, aircraft, and car bombs. Religion, tradition, and a rigid view of Islam all factor into this struggle and turn it into a confrontation between an ideology of the 7th century Arabia on the one hand, and a modernist theology that aspires to create a politically diverse Syria on the other. To further contextualize my views, I would rather refer to the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. It's well known internationally that this declaration is a historic turning point in the history of humanity, because it's an emphasis on the importance of human dignity and the affirmation that human life is always more valuable than an ideology, whatever that ideology may be. But the truth is, most Arab countries did not comply with this declaration for religious reasons, of course. I rightly believe that Islam, at least its orthodoxy, radically contradicts some of the core tenets of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. Reading the authoritative Islamic sources, one cannot help but to conclude that Islam is at least partly incompatible with our views on human rights. Articles are substantially contradict Islamic law, Sharia, are Article 2, everyone is entitled to all rights and freedoms without distinction of any kind. Article 16, 1, Article 16.1, men and women of full age without any limitation due to race, nationality, or religion have the right to marry and to found a family. Article 18, everyone, and this is very important, everyone has the right to freedom of thought, conscience, and religion. The right includes freedom to change his religion or belief, and the freedom, either alone or in community, with others and in public or private, to manifest his religion or her religion or belief in teaching, practice, worship, and observance. Thus, let me shed in this shortcut approach a little bit of light on the main sources for this current clash between Islam and human rights, and then discuss some of the intellectual obstacles that prevent Islam from entering the 21st century. By doing so, I hope to be able to explain how some organizations that adhere a literalist view of Islam can undermine international peace and security and destroy ancient cultures, as what happened yesterday in Palmyra. There is no doubt that Quran itself does not contain the slightest claim that it is valid for every time and every place. But the fact that Muslim scholars, for one reason or another, take some verses from the Quran and consider them without any convincing logical argument and evidence that Islam's most sacred text is limitlessly valid then, now, and forever. The first verse they usually cite says, this day, this is the main source for the claim that Quran is valid for every time and place. This day have I perfected your religion for you, completed my favor upon you, and have chosen for you Islam as your religion. 5:3 Al-Ma'idah. In the Quran, it's Al-Ma'idah, called Al-Ma'idah. Here I will use three highly regarded Orthodox Muslim interpreters to understand this verse. First of all, Tafsir at-Tabari. At-Tabari says, and the evidence that what you needed from your religion, I completed all to you, so do not increase it after this day. Contrary to some of what is mentioned above, the Qurtubi says, many verses and laws of the Quran has come down after that verse. And among them, one about usury and another about kalala. Kalala, it's a very Arabic word, means the man who died one who dies without a parent or a child. This is the tafsir of Al-Qurtubi. As for Ibn Kathir, he has an interpretation that is more in line with Al-Tabari. The Almighty, this is my translation to the text. The Almighty completed for them the religion, so they do not need other religion nor a prophet than their prophet prayers be upon him. So God make him the seal of the prophets and send him to the mankind and to the jinn. You know what the meaning of the jinn? Yes. So no lawful, but his no forbidden, but his no religion except what he prescribed. And everything tells is right and the truth. This is the tafsir of Ibn Kathir to this verse. Muslim scholars have been using another two verses to perpetuate the notion that teachings of the Quran are timeless and not restricted to a specific place. One of the verses attests to the idea that the Quran is a complete guide for the believers by saying that nothing have we omitted from the book. 6:38. This verse has three similar interpretations. First, the first is interpreted by Ibn Kathir as that nothing was left unwritten in the mother of the book. He means, the Quran. This is Ibn Kathir. Second, Al-Tabari echoes the previous statement by saying that we, meaning Allah, did not overlook anything in the book. There is nothing that is not in the book. Third, another confirmation of the previous view comes from Al-Qurtubi, who argues that in the Quran nothing of the religion is left without being referenced. In short, Muslim scholars have been following such an approach to systematically keep the myth that the Quran altogether is for every time and place alive. To expound on the difficulties and inflexible view of difficulties or such an inflexible view generates, I will point out some contradictions between the Quran and the UN Human Rights Charter. Demonizing the other in Islam. In Islam, there are two kinds of other. The people of the scripture, I mean Christians and Jews, and the other people who are neither Muslims nor the people of the scriptures. For the people of the scripture, the Quran says, fight those who believe not in Allah, nor in the last day, nor hold that forbidden which hath been forbidden by Allah and His Messenger, nor acknowledge the religion of truth from among the people of the book until, and this is very important, they pay the tribute with willing submission and feel themselves subdued. This is 9:29. The people of the scripture as a term explicitly means the Jews and the Christians. However, we can add them Sabians. Sabians in Arabic, Sabia or Mindaiyin. The people who, I have already a documentary on the internet about Sabia. And they worship planets, and they are already in Iraq, Abadan, Baghdad, and Damascus. This group have three options, Christians, Jews, and Sabians. Either to fight the Muslim to death, or to convert to Islam, or to pay the tribute with willing submission and feel themselves subdued. The second kind of the other in Islam presumably includes anyone who is neither a Muslim nor belong to the people of the scriptures. This is particularly the worst of the humankind. These people have two terrible choices. Since that they cannot pay the tribute with willing submission and feel themselves subdued, they have either convert to Islam or to fight the invading Muslims to death. The second problem, or second issue in Islam is slavery. Expectedly, Islam was in harmony with the spirit of the age in which it was produced. The Quran does not prohibit slavery. Yet, at the same time, it ironically forbids some of then common practices, which is far less threatening to humanity than slavery, such as intoxicants and gambling, dedication to stones, and divination by arrows. Quran 5:90. To be fair, one must acknowledge that Muhammad, however, did encourage freeing slaves as part of redeeming one's sins. In several verses of the Quran, we read about freeing a slave and as expiation for sins. The first verse is, never should a believer kill a believer, but if it so happens by mistake, compensation is due if one so kills a believer. It's ordained that he should free a believing slave. The second verse, Allah will not call you to account for what is futile in your oaths, but He will call you to account for your deliberate oaths. For expiation, feed 10 indigent persons on a scale of the average for the food of your families, or clothe them, or give a slave his freedom. Verse 585. By those who divorce their wives by zihar from zahr, back, to give her his back. Such a one should free a slave before they touch each other. 58:1. Despite the slave for sin strategy, the apparent practice of slavery is not completely banned in Islam. Concubinage. Concubinage as a subproduct of slavery is an issue that's recognized by Islam every day as legitimate. There are many references to concubinage in the Quran. If ye fear that ye shall not be able to deal justly with the orphans, marry women of your choice, 2 or 3 or 4. But if ye fear that ye shall not be able to deal justly with them, then only one, or a captive that your right hands possess. Okay. 4:3, also 4:24, 25:36. Nevertheless, it must be noted that without hesitation that some of Prophet Muhammad's behaviors and attitudes are completely in contradiction with those of the Islamic scholars that came much later after him and variously hampered an attempt to modernize Islam and contextualize some of the controversial Quranic verses. Regardless of the varying positions of some of his early successors, the ultimate validity of the Quran, some important Quran provisions were suspended shortly after Muhammad's death according to the needs of the then newly established Muslim state. The flexibility with which Muhammad dealt with the mundane issues of his time is quite apparent in the story of Islamic prohibition of the wine. In the beginning, it was considered that wine gives sustenance, and for the fruit of the date palm and wine, you get out wholesome and drink and food. 1665. In another verse, however, we read a different view. They ask thee concerning wine and gambling, say, in them is a great sin and some profit for men, but the sin is greater than the profit. 2:16. A third verse seems to frown upon a wine is it views as detrimental to one's communication with the divine. You, O you who have believed, do not approach prayer while you are intoxicated until you know what you are saying. Then at last, one of the latest surahs of the Quran forbid wine altogether and deems it as evil. You who believe intoxicants and gambling deductions of stones, and divination by ours are abomination of Satan's handiwork. Issue such abomination. 590. Furthermore, in his seminal book, The Text and Ijtihad, Abd Hussein Sharafuddin, the notable Shia thinker, details a myriad of ijtihads of the senior companions of the Prophet, which are contrary to the Quran. Some of them, among many, are related to Umar ibn al-Khattab, the second caliph of Muhammad. The Syria biography of Muhammad tells us that the Prophet was paying to people whose faith was weak in order to maintain their Islam, and thus their loyalty would be guaranteed. This behavior was supported by some Quranic texts, including alms are for the poor and the needy, and those employed to administer the funds, for those whose hearts have been recently reconciled to the truth, for those in bondage and in debt. 960. With the arrival of Umar ibn al-Khattab to power, he abolished the rule regarding those whose hearts have been recently reconciled to the truth. Umar justified his actions by claiming that the Prophet had to pay new converts because Islam was still weak and in need of loyalty. But during his reign, Umar believed that Islam has already been established and strong. Therefore, he saw no need for such a rule. In addition to that, Islamic literature tells us how Umar ibn al-Khattab banned temporary marriage that is temporary and without witnesses. This kind of marriage, according to Islamic tafsirs, was permissible at the time of the Prophet. So, the verse says, so for whatever you enjoy from them, you give them their due compensation as an obligation. 424. Islamic sources make clear that when Umar ibn al-Khattab found that the matter had exceeded the limit of satisfying sexual needs to become a legal, God-sanctioned prostitution, he abolished the practice altogether, disregarding the fact that it was and still technically is today permissible practice according to the Quran. Okay, just 1 minute. My conclusions. There is not even the slightest reference to the Quran validity for every time and the place in the Quran itself. And all what has been said on the issue by both moderate and extreme groups from a realistic perspective is just an invention of Islamic scholars that came much later than Muhammad. The critical crisis that is plaguing Islam today is the desire of Islamists to imprison Islam in a jail of timelessness. It is such a way of thinking that has brought us today face to face with the likes of the Islamic State, ISIS, a terrorist group which threatens not only the international peace and security, but also the age-long thriving civilizations of countries like Syria and Iraq. The solution to the global crisis that has resulted from the rise of Islamic State in Iraq and Syria requires, for the first and foremost, the rehabilitation of the entire Islamic culture that produce the like of the fighters of ISIS. The rehabilitation cannot be done by only utilizing the effort of Arab secularists, modern Muslims, and Westerns who are interested in doing humanity a favor by combating radical Islam. In order to achieve any tangible results in this regard, we need an urgent reformation of the public Islamic institutions that claim to be moderate, while in reality they keep on perpetuating the sacredness, holiness of certain Islamic texts and doctrines that constitute the ideological backbone of almost all terrorist groups, from Al-Qaeda to ISIS and Boko Haram. Finally, in ironic twist of fate, I found myself today here in front of you talking about the multinational group, Islamic group, terrorist group, whose members do not drink wine, yet they behead people, they destroy churches and ancient ruins, rape little children, and kidnap women to use them as sex slaves. Wine is not drunk by those fanatics because the ban on wine in Islam is crystal clear. However, till today, most Muslim scholars do not at all discredit the passages that make it permissible for the fanatics to behead, loot, rape, and destroy. These passages have always been there and still considered sacred, until they are rejected by mainstream Islamic institutions that have the influence to make a real change but are willing to. There is a good chance that the plight of our Yazidi brothers and sisters will be the plight of every life-loving man and woman who lives in the 21st century and has no intentions to return to the Dark Age. Thank you.